Hey guys, it's Victoria from Do Tell a Belle, and today we're going to work on a mystical watercolor butterfly. And I've already created a sketch, and if you want to paint along with me, you can download the outlines in the description area below. And if you're big on butterflies, I also have my Enchanted Wings butterfly coloring book that features a lot of different butterfly designs that you can trace and use as watercolors. And what's neat about this book is it also has a journaling section. You can see I've already colored some of the pages. It's a great way to relax and unwind. So let's get started on our watercolor butterfly. I'm going to use some colors that I already have on my palette for this exercise. And I'm going to start with a bit of a wet on wet technique, and I'm just going to lay down a wash of color just to map out my butterfly. This helps me get used to painting and loosening up a little bit. Now, if you find that this butterfly is too intricate and you want to try something a little bit more simplified, I will leave a link to another butterfly tutorial that I created at the end of this video. So first we're going to lay down some water to the areas that we want to drop in some color. And I am going to start with some Prussian blue. Just going to lay down a very light wash of Prussian blue. Towards the outer edges of my wings, I'm going to add a bit of alizarin crimson and just bring it up to the blue and allow it to mix in together and kind of blend. If you get too much water on your brush, not a big deal. You just take your 2 fingers and squeeze it off. I'm going to squeeze it over my water so I don't ruin my painting. I'm going to let this dry a little bit before moving on. Now, while that was drying, I went and grabbed a piece of paper towel. It's still damp. So I'm going to move down to the lower wings and just map out this area with color. If you see a cattail swishing across the lens of my camera, that would be Samantha. Usually Maxwell hangs out with me while I'm working on paintings, but he's napping right now, so we won't disturb him. In case you're wondering, I have 2 cats. Maxwell came first, and then I wanted to get him a playmate. And that's when Samantha joined our family. Now, if you've been following me for a while, you know that one of the things I love most about watercolor is doing a wet on wet technique and just having the colors blend in to each other. We're going to let this dry a little bit before moving on. So when painting with watercolor, you want to start with your lightest colors first and then move to dark. It's a layering technique. And I am going to paint part of my butterfly wing using a very light wash of cadmium orange. Actually, no, I believe this is cadmium yellow. My apologies. You can use whatever colors you have on your palette, but I'll also leave a link in the description area to all the materials that I used. Now when I'm painting this cadmium yellow, I'm using a wet on dry technique, which I'm painting the wet watercolor directly onto dry paper. And this gives me more control of the colors. They don't bleed into each other when you do it this way. I'm testing with the back of my finger in case the paper is still wet, which it is. This way I don't leave fingerprints on the paper on my painting. So we'll give this a little more time to dry. And since this is a mystical, magical butterfly, it doesn't really resemble any of the butterflies that we see in nature. This is more of our imagination and just loosening up and playing around with the colors, getting to know the colors on our palette a little bit more. Now, while that's drying, I'm going to talk about the brushes that I'm using. For the wet on wet and then the wet on dry, in larger areas, I'm using a number size round brush. And this is a sable, and it has spring to it. It bounces. And in case you were wondering what that sound was, they're remodeling upstairs. So I apologize for that. And for more control and finer details, I'm using a size 1 rigger brush. And you might not think that you have more control because it's a longer bristle brush, but you really do. You can test it out with a shorter bristle and see which you like better. Now I decided I want to add a little bit more interest to the markings on my butterfly. So I'm going to drop in some alizarin crimson and just let it bleed into the yellow. Now, if you like what you're seeing so far, give me a thumbs up and let me know. This helps me to continue to create great content for you. Now this is still slightly wet, but that's okay because I don't mind it bleeding. I'm going to darken these edges and I don't mind it bleeding into the wings a little bit. I'm going to use a more concentrated alizarin crimson. That means more pigment and less water as I go around the edge of my butterfly wing. And another thing that I like to do is just take some clean water, and while my pigment is still wet, just go up and touch the edges. Lay down the clean water and then just go up and touch the edges to soften them a little bit. This is a really fun technique and adds a lot of interest to your paintings. Soften that edge out a little bit. If you have some favorite techniques that you'd like to share, leave us a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm going to add a little bit more pigment right here. I get some comments on the music that I listen to, and this is something that really relaxes me. I'll leave a link to the channel that I listen to. The name escapes me right now. But this is like really a soothing exercise to do at the end of a long, hard day at work. Just put on some light music. Maybe make yourself a cup of chamomile tea and settle in. Now, while that was drying, I went and got a smaller size round brush because I want to paint inside here. And I want to paint within this area, this detailed area. So I'm going to use my Prussian blue, and I'm going to use a wet on dry technique. And carefully paint around the edge. Just to outline it. really digging the contrast between the color combinations. I'm going to do the same on this side. Now to tie this in, I'm going to paint some Prussian blue in these little markings on the wings. And it's okay that it's red underneath, because I'm painting over it with a darker color. For the body, I'm going to paint shades of Prussian blue. I want the center to be lighter and the outer edges to be darker, so I'm going to go over it first with a light wash of color just to map out the area. And while it's still wet, I'm just going to outline the edges with a more concentrated Prussian blue. Not concentrated enough. There we go. That way we get a nice distinction between the body and the wings. And notice how that color just bleeds into each other. I'm going to do the same with his head. I'm going to paint in my butterfly's antenna using my rigger brush. And I'm going to vary the shades between Prussian blue and Payne's gray. Now, as I mentioned earlier in this video, the rigger brush gives you more control, even though you wouldn't think it would because of the long bristles. I'm going to make sure that my point of my brush is nice and pointy. Because I feel like the antenna is still too light, I'm going to add in a bit of this Payne's gray. Closer to the head, and just kind of let it bleed upward into his antenna. Again, just blending that color so we don't have a hard edge. I'm kind of using the side of my brush as I'm laying down the pigment. And then with clean water, I'm blending the wing. So now we have all these gradations. The top wing is pretty dry, so I'm going to go in and paint in the veins. Again, using my rigger brush. Didn't have enough pigment on there. Stay tuned next week when I show you how to paint watercolor flowers and vines around the butterfly. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more weekly watercolor tutorials. Your support helps me bring more creative projects like this one to life. Happy painting and see you next time.